time.
This conference will now be recorded.
And if you have any questions, please place those in the chat box. When we get to the question and answer period of tonight's agenda, we will read through those. We'll be taking questions in that manner. Thank you. Okay, it's almost 6:30. I am going to go ahead and give a couple of courtesy minutes just for those that might take a little bit to log on. So just bear with us. We want to make sure that everyone gets a chance to participate in tonight. We do expect about 60 people is what we had sign up for this event. So we hope that they'll all be able to join us.
Hi, Corey. Dennis Marita.
Hey, Dennis, how you doing?
I'm doing okay. How about you?
Better. It's much quieter around here.
A long time coming, but glad we got there.
I appreciate everyone's patience. Just give it a couple more minutes and we'll get started.
Hi, Alexis. I've been here. I just realized that my name wasn't showing up, so sorry. I'm on a different computer, so I'm not sure how to. Okay, here we go. All right.
Okay, well, I want to thank everyone that is joining us tonight and that registered for this community meeting. I think it's been a long time coming and we recognize that. So we appreciate all of you taking the time out of your evening to join us. Just to go over a couple of the ground rules quickly, these were emailed out to you, but this meeting is being recorded to later be posted on our YouTube channel. So just want to make that known. So that way you all can reference that later and hold us accountable for what's talked about here. Also, just remember to keep your mics muted. That way we can get through this and without any of the background. Also, we will take your questions and feel free to submit those anytime through the chat box. Go ahead and put those in at any point during the meeting, and when we get to that Q&A, we will go through that. And I apologize, my name is Alexis Brown. I am your Assistant City Manager for the City of Imperial. I'd like to introduce our newly appointed, but also longtime known city attorney who is now our city manager, Mr. Dennis Morita, who's joining us this evening. Our park superintendent, Tony Lopez, who is going to be our subject matter expert for this evening, and our Mayor Pro Tem, Corinne Eugenio, who you have all talked with. And Corinne, I'd like to invite you to say some of your welcoming remarks.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for coming tonight. All I really wanted to say is that I'm happy you guys can make it tonight and that I know how important parks are to you, specifically to your neighborhood. I too have been concerned with the state of your parks. Believe me, I've been doing everything within my power to make sure that we look at this from every angle and that all opportunities for the parks in your neighborhood are looked at tonight. So again, thank you for coming. And I hope that we can make this a productive session and walk away with something that you're all happy with. So thank you again.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Eugenio. So now I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Tony Lopez. He's going to give us just a brief history / where we're at just with our park and go into some of the issues that you all are familiar with, but just a brief overview of that. So go ahead, Tony.
First and foremost, good evening, everybody. I'm glad everybody could make it that's on the chat room. My name's Tony Lopez. Like Alexa said, I'm the park superintendent for the City of Imperial. Just, I want to kind of touch on a few points here. I'm not going to get too much into detail or take too much of your time for comment. Just to go over the history of what the design of this retention basin / park was intended for. So here we have a situation where you have a retention basin, which is the original purpose of this design, and it also doubles as a park. So the main word being retention basin. So you have a storm basin where we call the park, and there you have the issue where you have water that catches there. It's a storm basin, and you had at one point when it was designed walkability and trails throughout the park, and it's been washed out due to the rains and the flooding from whatever very little rain we do get has been an issue with causing damages and anything that's in that floor of that basin park not being able to last. What I want to kind of also touch is we and you guys to kind of give us some of your input and you guys as residents on what you would like to see, and then we would go back and look at those possibilities and see what we can do right now as a city to improve that park portion of the retention basin and make it more user friendly for you guys that are actually utilizing this park, and make it where you guys can actually make it usable for you. As you know, one of the issues we have here, it being a retention basin, is the very bad soil that is at the base of that retention. For those of you who live there, you have, you see greenery around the slopes and in some of the areas in the basin that are elevated above the floor. But anything else in that basin is just really the soil content, the salinity and the alkali content there is so high that there is really no growability in that basin portion of it. Once you start to get into a situation where you have water that holds or stays there for a while, then that salt rises and it really kills everything that you try to grow in the bottom portion of that basin. We do have lift stations that help with that problem and help pump some of the water out there through gravity flow. But as you guys well know, that when it rains and the flooding is there, it stays there for a few weeks before it drains into the soil, and then you have the issue where your soil is you can't even walk in there for the most part for weeks or maybe a month after the fact. So that's where we're at right now. We want to create a situation where we can utilize the space that's already there and improve upon what we have to a certain point where it makes sense and we can sustain those improvements and it doesn't become an issue where we waste money or taxpayer money on things that we can improve but they're not sustainable over time. So we're excited to hear all your comments and input on what you think or what you feel like we want to see out there, and we'll see what we can do to address a lot of the issues and concerns you guys have. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony, and thank you to all of you participating. Your questions and comments are coming in here on the chat box, so we recognize that. And without further ado, we want to jump right into that portion because this is your meeting, this is your time to have our attention so we can hear your questions and concerns. So a few of you did submit questions as you registered, so I'm going to read through those. A lot of them are actually repetitive as to what's being in the chat box, so hopefully we can kind of bridge that gap and then still have time to go further in detail. Obviously, what's the main thing that we're hearing, the concerns that have been raised about Paseo del Sol is the condition of the soil, as well as the status of fixing the park. What's our timeline? I know that we've addressed here, Tony's made it clear that it is, unfortunately, I say that, a retention park. And the high alkali levels, because we've done repeated soil testing, and to see if there's a way that we could mitigate that. And a lot would, we're in a predominantly agriculture community, and as farmers do, they're allowed to use leach lines or tiling systems that are able to allow for the drainage of that and not allow the salt in the soils to rise. Unfortunately, when we've asked if we would be able to do that, the State of California Water Quality Control Board will not permit the city to do so. They will not permit the Imperial Irrigation District to grant us a waiver to do so. So I just want to put that out there. So that in turn limits our options with what we can do. So we want to discuss that with you tonight. As far as some of the concerns that have been raised through this process of tonight's meeting, the biggest concern is the accumulation of the dumping of the water into the park, which again, it's retention, but what that creates as far as the air quality and the kids playing in the park and what we can do to mitigate that. That seems to be the biggest concern raised here in these questions. It's repeating. Tony, and maybe you can answer this. There's also questions about the wall around the park that separates some of the homes from the retention. If you can comment on that as to if we can inspect that or when the last time we've done that, so we can let the residents know.
Yes, absolutely. So I think this email was sent to me a while back with concerns about the condition of the wall on the southeast corner of the bigger retention park, and its condition, it being cracked or falling over. From what my understanding is, since it is considered the resident's backyard fence, it would be then the resident's responsibility to repair. Again, I can double check with the community development and code enforcement on this issue and have a response for this resident on this concern. But as it stands right now, I believe that's what I understood, but I can clarify it in detail for the resident, absolutely.
How is it that when we have an insect problem due to the rains and the accumulation of water, what is the process in which that we need to go through so we can mitigate that?
Okay, so the process when we have what you would call standing water that for some reason or another doesn't drain into the gravity-fed lift station, if it's standing and then becoming an issue for where we would have mosquitoes, reproduction or larvae in that standing water, then we have trash pumps, then we would pump that water directly into the lift station to mitigate that standing water.
Okay. We do have a question as far as CFDs that go into the park. There is an amount as far as that goes. We did tally that with, we have almost 300,000 for CFD funds that can be used. And that's the amount of CFD funds specific for Paseo. And that's public knowledge. That's for anyone to have access to. It's on our website, but that is what is there for any improvements specific to the park. So the question at this point is you hear the environmental issues that we have with the park and with the ground itself in the area. what is it that we can do at this point to improve the park moving forward? What is it that you would like to see, understanding the issue with growing grass there? What can we do? One of the questions we have is about the vacant land with the homes next to the new school. I can answer that that land has been purchased because it was private land or private property. It has been purchased by a developer. It will be now developed with the rest of the housing of the tentative maps that were recorded. Rosarito Drive will be pushed through to Cross there, and the rest of the housing will be built out in that area. Tony, a question here or a statement, artificial grass, turf or artificial grass. How would that work in that area?
Well, you would essentially run into the same problem that we ran into with the decorative gravel trails that you had before. That soil there, it holds moisture for months after the raining season. I know that after a big rain and the water finally saturates into the soil, we cannot get in there with the tractor to essentially turn over the dirt so we get rid of that snow effect and for a few months after the fact. So with the artificial turf, if you don't have you'll have it where that moisture would ruin the turfing. You would spend a lot of money on a fix. It would not work. The moisture would, and the salt and the salinity would damage that turfing.
So if I may, Alexis, unless you were going to, I was just going to talk about a few. Okay, so against what you may believe, we've actually spent a lot of time talking about this park. I have harassed everyone in the city about this park since I've been elected. So believe me, we've had many conversations. And so I just wanted to share some of the information that I've been relayed in these conversations. One, as Tony was saying, was essentially created as a water retention basin, and as Tony said, the soil there is incredibly flawed. It's filled with alkali, and so no matter how many efforts that you take to grow grass or put artificial grass, that alkali will always subside, if I'm correct, right? And so I also brought about the idea of tiling, irrigation that's used in farming, but I was also told that that kind of irrigation isn't allowed to be used within city limits. So some of the options that we've discussed are putting the bulk of the energy into that smaller park across the street because it is more manageable. The soil seems to be better. And maybe playing with the landscape that's already there in the bigger retention basin. And I was just wondering what you guys would think of maybe a desert landscape with trails, because the process of putting grass in there seems to be a futile one. And so we've talked, like I've said, we've talked about putting more energy and effort into the smaller one across the street and just working with the natural conditions of the water retention basin and making the one across the street a really nice green park. So thoughts or ideas? Anything you want to add to that, Alexis or Tony or Dennis?
So I can comment on what you're saying there. A few things that we've also discussed is maybe creating more usability on the larger side. I know that we had talked about potentially moving that playground to the opposite side, but as it stands right now, we want to be able to utilize the funds that we have available in that CFD and really do as much as we can in-house, because as Alexis mentioned, we have about 300,000 in that CFD account. that really starts to disappear once you start to factor in prevailing wage. So what we want to focus on here is usability is my main thing here. We already have a playground there. We have one gazebo. We have some quick solutions would be to add more seating and usability on that side where we already have an existing sidewalk, and we can maybe create some trails where we can do a designated joggers path if that works out to where we can manage that. Those are some things that we can do that we can create it to where it can be used now. Like I said, we have to really think about moving forward the dollar amount versus how much we can do through the city versus contract, because that dollar amount is not very high when you start to factor in prevailing wage and going out to bid and all that. So we want to focus on improvements that we can do as employees through the park system or in coordination with other departments that will make this park on either side more usable now. And that's what we're really kind of focused on based on your input, making it usable and more user-friendly now versus down the line with what we have to work with.
So we're getting a lot of comments as to the dog park in Wolftown and how that is. Just to highlight, one of the situations there is that where Wolftown is does not have the same soil issues and environmental conditions that Paseo does. So as far as we understand that is also a retention park. Unfortunately, the alkali levels are not the same there, which is why there is grass, which is why that is a larger area. As Tony stated, with CFDs, it may seem $300,000 is a lot of money, but with any maintenance or construction projects, that does require the city to pay prevailing wage. And that adds anywhere between a 30 and 40% increase to a general cost of construction for anything, even our wall that we put up at Sky Ranch. I mean, that project alone ended up increasing significantly because of the fact that it was a prevailing wage. So we understand that here. We have some questions. Yes, what about concrete with basketball courts and making it more of that kind of a sports type park? That's definitely something we can look into, and building up the concrete in the base of the areas. We've added some lighting to the basketball court that's on that smaller area, smaller retention park that's over there. We absolutely can look into that because it is concrete and it's not grass and it's not turf. We want to do something with that is sustainable in the area. We want to make sure that it is something that can last long term, which is, again, if you're just joining, when we talked about the turf and the fake grass, if you will, the alkali will still eat into that and it will still deteriorate. And then we're back in the same situation, but yet we don't have any monies in the CFDs. So we have benches and better lighting. We can improve, we can add shaded gazebo picnic areas. We can add barbecue pit areas to around in the larger park, retention park where the playground is. We can do those things. We can absolutely look at ways to improve the playground itself. All of these suggestions are great coming in. What we do intend to do with all the suggestions that are coming in here, as we see the back and forth, we see, okay, a skate park area for teens. So what we would like to do is take all of this and within the week, you would see the same way that you received the email to register for this, we would be sending out a survey, and we need to ask you guys to respond to that so we can get some real input and direction, and the majority of you can have the say in how we move forward with this park and making it better. So all of these, yeah, I see here a splash pad. Tony, as far as a splash pad going in that area, would that even be possible with the fact that it's a retention park and the irrigation that would have to be put into that?
It's an option that would definitely be very costly. You're talking about pump system, filtration system, some kind of a recirculating system for the feature itself. As far as drainage goes, I would have to check to see if that's even possible to drain in that water. But with that recirculating system, you have a lot of costs that come with it. It's not only the concrete and the features, but also the, if we're going to put any shading or tables around it to make it bearable in the summer, and then some kind of a well system for recirculation and pump and filtration system. So you really start to get really up there in cost when you talk about splash pads and skate parks, just because concrete is very expensive. Like I said, 300,000 is a lot on paper, but we lose a lot of that in wages and stuff like that. There is other options out there where we can maybe potentially look for grants for that area to maybe match what we have in the CFDs to augment what we have in there already. But as it stands right now, that's not a possibility that we could, based on where we're at right now, for improvements, for quick improvements, I don't see that as feasible.
Okay.
Sorry, Alexis. One thing I also wanted to mention that when this development was created, surveys were taken at the time of its construction, and what everyone relayed to the developers at the time was that they were really interested in walking and running trails. And so that's how it was built initially, based on the people who lived there at the time it was built. So the soil hasn't sustained the way that we'd like it to. We've inherited this problem as a city, and yes, you do have CFD dollars, which we want to use responsibly, but we have to work within the conditions of the soil. So we all want to see something built there. We just have to think about something that's going to sustain long term, and the fact that $300,000 won't go very far. But some of the ideas that I've liked that I'm seeing are the idea of like a skate park or a skate bike park. When I mentioned the desert landscape before, that was my intention, is some kind of like walking, biking kind of trails. But if it would be possible, once we talk about this after this meeting, and we get more feedback, that is a possibility. There are possibilities here. So before everyone gets, feel like there aren't possibilities, there are. And that's why we're here. And there, bike parks or skate parks are something that we can discuss. Again, I want to remind you that there is the park across the street that can be made green, that doesn't, and if I'm wrong, Tony, that has more possibilities as far as it having less alkali, right? So you may have a different kind of park on one side and a green one on the other side.
And we can definitely look at all the options, like you're saying, Corinne. There is no. This is what this is for. We can explore all options. That's what we're here for. We want to make your park user friendly. Again, while spending your money, your taxpayer money, to wisely. We don't want to just spend it and have something where it doesn't last very long, but it looks nice for a few years, but then after a few years it's gone, and then we'll have the same issue all over again. That's on my part. That's what I don't want. I want to improve the parks in a way where we can have those improvements for years to come, for not only the people living there now, or people that may come and live there or buy houses in the future. So no options are off the table, but we do have to keep in mind where we're at now, and when we're talking about all these other options that could be in the future.
We do have a couple of comments that I just want to touch base on in the chat here. In regards to the setting of CFDs and what those that you pay, that's actually set by the developer. That's not set by the City of Imperial. So I do want to just clarify that briefly there. With regards to what we can do with the CFDs, that's where we do have some say in that capacity, and we can definitely to the resident that put that in the chat, I'd be happy to have a conversation with you after this in regards to all the CFDs and what goes into that and how those are put into place in different subdivisions. So but that is a developer. In regards to, we recognize that it does need to be a family-friendly park with appropriate lighting for safety reasons. We definitely want to make sure that happens. And we understand the frustrations that you all have been vocal for the last several years, and particularly in the last two, that needing something to be done, wanting something to be done, and we want to make sure that something is done. We want to provide that service, and we want to improve the park. That's why we're here, and that's why we're doing this, and we want to hear from you. And we genuinely appreciate all of your participation this evening, even though there's going to be a lot of questions that come up after this meeting's over, and you all have our contact information, and I want to encourage you to use that. And again, reach out and hold us accountable as we move forward with this. There's some questions here with as far as getting roads repaved. We do have and this is, we want to keep on topic here about the park, but we do have a repaving schedule that we can make available to all of you with regards to the streets and where those fall on that schedule as far as getting those repaved. A lot of our repaving obviously falls to Measure D monies and SB1 funding. So that's where we get those monies to put those projects in place. I see here more street lights and things like that. So we've got a lot to do, and we have a lot of feedback here. And again, I just want to touch the property next to the school that's been used as a dump recently. That is under new ownership, and it is moving forward with development. So you will see those concerns mitigated in the short future. That individual does want to pursue developing the rest of those houses. So that will not be a dumping ground. I'm seeing here. So again, our objective here is to take all of this feedback and raising the elevation of the play surface to incorporate a layer of rock bed filtration. So that's definitely something we can take a look at of elevating that. So what we want to do with this is put out all of the comments here that we've gathered and the information of what you as the residents want to see, the residents that are there now. And we want to put it out in a survey of you to make your choice of your top 3 picks. And then we want to continue this. We want to have another meeting and discuss those results and our plan to move forward with them and give you a timeline in which you can again hold us accountable. We want to be accountable for this. We want to move things forward. And I'm just reading here as far as questions to come in. So I know that this dialogue is not giving you all the answers that you may want in this time period, but it is our commitment to you in that area that we want to move forward and better that park for you. If we don't have any more questions, just kind of waiting a little bit to see if there's anything else or another consideration of us putting into the park.
And Alexis, you touched upon this briefly, the idea of the CFDs and that they are imposed by the developers themselves. These are not city imposed fees. And in case that you're unfamiliar with how CFD works, and correct me if I'm wrong, Alexis, but when the developer builds houses, they have several choices in how to address the CFDs. Either they can absorb the cost themselves and incorporate those into the cost of the housing. So the cost of your house would be more if the CFDs were included in the sale of the house. Or he can impose them, or they can impose them in a smaller fee that comes in a monthly amount. So you're paying the fees now because that's the way that the developer created. Otherwise, you may have bought a house that would have been $30,000 more. So those are not fees that we impose. Again, those were agreed upon by the developer, and therefore the maintenance of your development. And I don't know if you wanted to add anything about that, but I see a lot of people saying, why don't we reduce them? And that's something that we didn't impose or have control of.
Correct. And that's what I'm saying. The one part that we do have control of is how the fees for the improvements of which we're discussing here, that's the almost $300,000. That is where we do have the control and how we can put that into the improvements of the park. In regards to the property off of Ayton, that is private property there, and it is commercially zoned. So as to the questions of the occasional trucks that may park there, that is private property that is not city controlled in there. Okay.
Alexis, and the group, this is Dennis. With respect to the Community Facilities District, it's something that the formation of which happens at the outset of the development, because in order to impose or create a Community Facilities District, my recollection is that there's a vote required, and you can pretty well predict the outcome of the vote when there's one owner, the developer. And so once the Community Facilities District is formed, and I assume what happened in this case, there are bonds sold, the proceeds of which are used to reimburse the developer for some of the improvements that are installed. And so what you see on your property, I get it. What you see on your property tax bill, and so you're painfully aware of how this all kind of shakes out. It goes to repay bonds that were issued to create a pot of money to reimburse the developer for some of those costs. That's what you see with the CFD. I think what we're talking about is probably as obviously the park component of that. But a lot of what you see on your property tax bill, if you're wondering, gosh, if I'm paying this much on my property taxes, why isn't there more money? Why aren't they telling us there's more money available for parks? And it's because there are various components of what you pay on your property tax. There is that the facilities part to reimburse the developer. There is the parks part, and I don't know if there is other service components to this particular CFD. In any case, there are various pieces to what you pay as an add-on to your property tax, only a piece of which is this park.
Also, I think part of the reason why this has taken so long is because there was a possibility, as Alexis mentioned before, that we would have that lot that is now being used by the developer. But there was a possibility last year before that was solidified that could be an option as far as starting over from scratch with something that wasn't a retention basin. Now that that's off the table, it took us this long to really know exactly the direction of that lot. So now we know we have those two specific properties to work with, the retention basin and the smaller park. And so again, it's just a matter of knowing your funds. These funds cannot be used anywhere else. We couldn't, even if we wanted to, that $300,000 will be spent on your park, on your parks, and whatever you decide or we decide based on your feedback. But you just have to be hopeful in the fact that we are working towards it based on your guidance, and that it will happen and your money is there. And like I said, we can't spend it elsewhere.
Thank you, Corinne. Yes, we want this to be a community-driven project, and that sums it up. So I'm going to take the last question that came in here with regards to when can you know what will be possible? So As I said, we're going to take all of the input that you've given us here, and you will have a survey in your inbox no later than the end of next week. You will have that. I really encourage all of you to reach out to your neighbors in a safe and physically distant sort of way, please, to encourage them to complete that survey, to choose how and what direction they would like to see. We will make sure that all the options that are on that survey are feasible and able to be accomplished, because we don't want to give any kind of false hope either that, you know, you all are wanting to choose something. And unfortunately, you know, it wouldn't even be possible, say, in the retention. So we want to make sure that all your options there, we're able to meet that goal. Once we get the results from that, we will want to schedule a meeting with you to discuss the results of that. And in that meeting, we will provide the timeline of how it's going to move forward. We will continuously seek grants to continue to improve outside of the CFDs, but specific to expand on the amenities at this park. And we will not stop in that regard. We will continue to move forward. So that is the timeline for what we can promise you here, and that you can hold us accountable. And again, that's one of the reasons why we record this meeting, is so we can make it accessible to you, and then you can call us out at a council meeting if necessary. And we want to make sure, though, that we meet all the goals here that we've discussed. So with that, I'm going to thank all of you again and ask Mr. Morita if he has any closing remarks.
Just very briefly, I want to thank all of you for participating. And I want to say that you have an advocate on the council in the Mayor Pro Tem Eugenio. Of course, as Alexis has indicated, we expect and you as the residents to keep us on task. But aside from that, I know that Mayor Pro Tem Eugenio will, you have a powerful voice on the council that I look forward to her keeping us on task as well. Tony, I know is committed to this area, and Alexis will keep the technology and put that to good use for us. So we look forward to having participation from you and your neighbors, and hopefully we'll get to where we all want to be sooner rather than later. And again, I appreciate your participation.
And Alexis, I just wanted to add, in regards to the pool, just to give you a point of reference, the new water recreational center that was built by the city of El Centro cost $15 million. $11 million of that was funded by redevelopment funds, which they used to get often because they're considered a lower socioeconomic community. We are not considered a low socioeconomic community, and so we don't get the same funds. Even if those redevelopment funds don't exist anymore, if they did, they aren't something we'd get. But in addition to the fact that costs $15 million, it's a lot of maintenance that they're paying a lot of money for. They got the money to build it. They put in about $4 million of their own, but they're actually bleeding a lot of money right now because they're not able to use that pool or that rec center right now. So just to give you perspective, $300,000 contrasted to $15 million is quite a difference. We also have to think about the longevity of whatever we turn it into, right? If your CFD funds can only cover so much, and so we want to think long term, we want to think practical, and we want to build something that can be sustained by those by your money. But again, thank you everyone for joining us. I look forward to this project. Like Dennis said, right, I'm sure they're tired of hearing me talk about this community, but I'm committed to it. I, like you, love parks. I love greenery. I have a 5-year-old, and it's as important to me as it is to you. I have many friends that live in your neighborhood, so we're thinking about it all the time, and I'm positive that we can make something happen, and we can only do that with your input, your feedback, and your participation, right? So, so I'm excited to see what we come up with, and thank you again for coming tonight.
All right, with that, thank you all so very much and enjoy the rest of your evening. And again, please look for that survey in your inboxes next week. We'll also make that available on our social media sites, and just encourage your neighbors and the rest of your community to please take that so we can get those results in, and we can get that feedback and timeline put together so we can meet again here and go through the next steps and have that allocated out as to how it will be used and when it will be done. Thank you all. Have a good night.
Thank you all.